Yes, like Amber said, my name is Shettis Kroll. I am the Victim Assistance Coordinator with the Gage County Victim Assistance Program. So I'm here today. I was asked to come and speak a little bit about our program. I brought Investigator Hanson with me today so he can kind of give the perspective of law enforcement and what they do in the Victim Advocacy Program. So the Gage County Victim Assistance Program is actually has been in existence since 1995, so roughly 27 years now. It is supported by the Victims of Crime Act, which is a federal grant, also known as VOCA. We also receive in-kind and cash match from both Beatrice and Gage County. The Victim Assistance Program actually came in existence in 1995 due to there being a lack of services for victims in our community. So our current police chief, Chief Lang, sent out a community survey, and that's kind of how our program began. So after a crime occurs, it is common for a person who has been victimized to feel threatened or angry, and most of the time they are very uncertain on how to move forward after the victimization. They have questions that need to be answered, oftentimes left with what's next in the process. So that's kind of where our program comes into place. So just a fun statistic here, in 2020 there were 23 million violent and non-violent crime victims. This translates to 1 every 5 seconds being committed in our communities across America. So if we break that down into Gage County, we had roughly 6,607 total incidences or calls responded to, which equates to about 45 calls per service each day in Gage County alone. We do have 2 advocates, and we're actually housed down at the Beatrice Police Department, although we serve all of Gage County. I am the program director, and then we have an assistant advocate named Marty, and she's been with us for about 6 years now. So like I said, we're housed at the Beatrice Police Department, but we do serve all of Gage County, so that includes the Sheriff's Office, Weimar Police Department, the Nebraska State Patrol, and then we also work very closely with the Gage County Attorney's Office. We are a 24/7 program, so we do respond to calls when called upon by the shift supervisor. So if there is a crime of domestic violence, let's say, and the victim is in need of crisis, we'll oftentimes be called in on scene and help provide immediate crisis assistance, provide them with a protection order if that's something they're seeking, sheltering, those types of things. So other services that we provide within our program, along with responding to on-scene, is we provide information not only to law enforcement, but we explain the law enforcement and the criminal justice process to any victims of crime that come through our doors. We accompany the victim to court and provide advocacy and support for the whole court process from start to finish. That is something that's very unique about our program. We're a system-based program versus a community-based program. A community-based program would be like Hope Crisis. So with a community-based, you're getting them after the crisis, where I'm getting them from the very beginning and moving them through the process to the very end. We assist with protection orders. We have 3 types of protection orders in the state of Nebraska. We have domestic violence protection orders, harassment protection orders, and sexual assault protection orders. We also assist them with a reparations program, which is a compensation program for any victims of crime. We provide emotional support and referrals to other agencies when needed, so the long-term crisis after the victimization has occurred. We coordinate with other agencies to provide emergency food, clothing, and sheltering. We provide information on safety planning. That's one of our huge things that we do, as domestic violence is our #1 victimization here in Gage County that we serve. We contact employers and creditors if requested by the victim, so maybe they are a victim of identity theft. We'll reach out to the credit bureaus, employers, whatever we can help assist them through this process. We do crisis intervention, so that on-scene response. We work with law enforcement and the county attorney's office. We'll also accompany those victims through those processes with the county attorney, so meetings, interviews with law enforcement. We assist with property relief, so once the property or evidence has been collected and is no longer needed, we assist with making sure that the victims can obtain those back. We provide education and training not only to victims, but also to community members on various types of victim advocacy. We give out 911 cellular phones. So we get donations from the community, and we give these out to victims of domestic violence. So these are phones that no longer work, but you can still access 911 on them. And these are good to stash around homes, cars, wherever a victim would need one in order to gain access to call 911 or seek help. We provide transportation, so either to or from court, maybe they're seeking a new location, relocating, we'll assist with that. Parole information, victim impact statements are another number one thing that we also assist with. This is an opportunity for victims to have their voice heard throughout the criminal justice process, what they may be looking for in the resolution of the case, how it impacted them and their family. We provide short-term counseling and then address confidentiality programs. So maybe a victim of domestic violence is needing to leave an unsafe situation. We'll assist them with helping them provide them with an anonymous address. And then we help them sign up for what's called the Nebraska Victims of Crime Alert Portal. So any victim of a crime who the defendant has been arrested, we can sign them up to be notified for the custody status of that offender. So if they've moved facilities, if they bond out, they'll be notified within 15 to 45 minutes of that person's movement or release from jail. And then we just provide any general information assistance that victims may have, community members, law enforcement, those types of things. So why do we need system-based advocacy programs? So victims have unanswered questions about the criminal justice system and how and why decisions are made. So in my various roles in victim advocacy over the last 8 years, victims have identified some very specific needs and gaps throughout the criminal justice process. And I just have some of the comments that they have made throughout the years. One, I was not notified of the offender's bond release. My family feels lost and forgotten. I was not aware of parole after a quarter of the sentence. It would have been helpful to have known the process and the timeline. So oftentimes victims think what they see on TV is it'll be really quick justice, and it's actually pretty slow. It's a slow moving process. And so letting them know the time frame is not going to be tomorrow they're going to be arrested or within a month they're going to be in jail, being realistic and giving them those expectations. 11 days to arrest him for my rape, and I didn't understand why. No one knows how bad it really was. I felt very alone. I was never notified of the plea. Sentencing was a complete shock to me. And I was never informed that I could actually give an impact statement. I wish I would have done this. So these are all things that I've experienced throughout the 8 years of my advocacy work in the Quad Cities. I was out there for about 8 years, kind of where I got my work started at. I actually got started in victim advocacy through my own personal story of victimization. Like Amber had mentioned, I was attending the University of Kearney for business, where I was actually sexually assaulted while working nights at a hotel. The process was actually very traumatizing. Going through the process was more traumatizing than the assault itself, and that sounds very bizarre, but you'd be quite surprised how many victims will tell you that going through the criminal justice process can be re-traumatizing, if not more. That offender actually did not receive much time at all. The offense was pled down, and he then later applied for what's called a petition to set aside criminal conviction. And so that was granted, and it was like it had never happened. So at that point, that's when I shifted gears and wanted to get into advocacy work. So I switched degrees from business and then headed to Peru State for criminal justice, and then that's where I am today. So I can 100% relate with victims of crime and how they may feel moving through this process. So after a crime occurs, reactions and trauma varies from person to person. This can include being fearful, scared, shocked, numb, angry, denial, disbelief, and anxiousness. Most of the time, people are uncertain how to go about resuming their lives after they've been victimized. One may not know what to do next or to whom to ask, and this is where the Gage County Victim Assistance Program can help navigate those victims through this process. So victims of crime experience various feelings, so the lack of control. There were so many little things that kept coming up missing. Every day we could find something else. They could care less what was on that video, but to me, that was my baby, and I just wanted my things back. That was a victim of robbery. Fear. Some people say, well, why didn't you say anything? Well, how could I? I only told my mom. It took me a while to tell her, and that was a victim of child abuse. Shock. At this point in time, I realized my life was in danger. He kept me overnight. Everyone stepped in and helped me get out of that relationship. I had the most confidence that he would be punished for what he did. And that was a victim, a person with a disability. Helplessness, I never even defended myself, and that's what's the hard part. I always find confidence to protect myself. I am very angry. As an assault victim, and anger. Stupid act often affects so many lives that one stupid act can affect people like they don't even exist, and that is a survivor of homicide. And so at the end of working with victims, we send out a survey, and some of these are statements that came back from the victims themselves or secondary victims, so family members of victims. So what do victims and survivors want? Victims want to know what's happening so they can predict and plan. Victims want to know that people who commit crimes will have the complete terms of the treatment in their sentence that is ordered. And victims want to know that their sense of safety is important and effects will be made to restore their security. So in our determination to ensure the rights of the offenders, we frequently ignore those that are most affected by the offender's actions, and those are the victims. It is critical that victims and survivors' perspectives are considered. The Victim Assistance Program is only a small piece of that balanced approach to allow victims to be engaged in all stages of the process. And that's where that victim impact statement is really impactful, because that's their one chance to really be heard about how this victimization has really affected their lives and well-being. So crime victims that we serve. So what crime victims do we serve? This list that I'm about to read is not all inclusive, and we get referrals from law enforcement agencies in Gage County, including the county attorney's office. Some of these crimes are reported and others are not reported. So we have survivors of homicide victims, assault, robbery, child abuse, elder abuse, sexual assault, adult survivor of incest, domestic violence, which is our #1 victimization, DUIs, crashes, burglary, stalking, human trafficking, and then other offenses such as harassments, threats, protection order violations, identity theft, vandalism, criminal mischief. The list just goes on and on. So really, any victimization that you can think of, we're here to serve them. Just some interesting facts here in the United States, the crime clock. One woman is battered every 9 seconds. One person is injured in an alcohol-related crash every 2 seconds. Approximately 6 children are reported abused and neglected every minute. 1 violent crime every 19 seconds, and 1 property crime every 3 seconds. In the state of Nebraska, your chance of becoming a victim of a violent crime in Nebraska is 1 in 303, and your chances of becoming a victim of property crime in Nebraska is 1 in 53. So oftentimes, I would ask how many of you have been victims yourself, but I don't want to out you here. But most people don't know our services exist until they become a victim themselves, and then they don't know where to turn. So it's always good knowledge to have that we are available. If you have questions or if you know somebody, you can always give us a contact and we can walk you through that process. I did include some handouts there. The yellow one is our brochure. I did not have time to fold it, so my apologies. And then the other one is some statistics on our program from 2021. So last year in 2021, we served 776 victims, received direct support services from our program. That's either a first victim or secondary victim, so that could be a child who may witness domestic violence. And as of this year, so far we have served 660 victims. So you can see that we are fairly busy. We have 2 advocates that serve all of Gage County, and sometimes that's not even enough. The top victimization, again, that we serve is domestic violence, and you can kind of see if you go down that victimization list, the next one being stalking and harassment. Let's see here. When you're looking at this list, please note that individuals may be counted in more than 1 victimization type. So you'll see at the very bottom, it looks like we serve just under 2,000 individuals, but those could be somebody who has a domestic violence, who's a victim of domestic violence, but then also has a protection order violation that's associated with that assault. I think that is all that I have. I'm going to turn it over to Sergeant Hanson, who can kind of give you a little perspective on what it's like working with our program, law enforcement side of things, and then we can take some questions.
Right. Yeah, thank you. My name is Tim Hanson. I'm with the Gage County Sheriff's Office. I've been in law enforcement for 30 years, not the time she was born, probably.
Pretty low.
So the victim advocate is an important role because the cops are there, it's a time of crisis, they're trying to get evidence for whatever type of crime it is, burglary, an assault, a theft, anything like that. They're more focused on the details. But especially when it comes to domestic violence, and you're taking the person that's intimate to them to jail. In Nebraska, they have the, it doesn't matter what the victim says, if there's probable cause, this law says we shall arrest a domestic assault suspect. So we take off, we gather our evidence, get some statements, and that person's left alone. But what we can do now, and not have to, or we can rest assured that they're going to get proper follow-up, is give them a card. Here's our victim advocate's number. Give them a call. They'll help you with the case. Because the officers or the deputy's going to go on to the second and third and fourth and fifth thing months down the road. Chevis in her office will track the cases. I've seen them sitting over there in court. Yep, this is what happened. This is what the judge says. Gets back to the victim. Not that I have more things to do than she does, but I don't even get notified sometimes because it's not necessary for me to be there. But it is necessary for someone to be there for the victim. And that's where Chevis and her office come into play. Because we all, I mean, I think I'm a pretty nice guy, but when you're out in the middle of a crisis, it's nice to just have somebody that you can refer them to. The people may or may not have a history with law enforcement. We're all pretty much on the same page as far as what needs to be done. And Marty has been there 6 years or so. A lot of times they will tell the victim advocate things that they won't tell us. When Chevis can get a hold of us and let us know where we need to go, or say, hey, this person needs you to call back. At a minimum, the victim gets an answer. Chevis will text me or call somebody. What's going on? They'll say, well, you can't say this, you can't say this, but tell them it's still being looked into. Gets the answer back to them. That's all they want to know. They want it because it's a big mystery if you haven't been through the criminal justice system. Somebody gets arrested or a ticket or something happens, and you never find out about it until it's put in the Beatrice Daily Sun or Queeby or something like that. But I think that the coordination between all the law enforcement agencies and the county attorney's office is vital because they have a role that can only be fulfilled by those type of people. Not that I don't want to try and help people, but I can't go back and talk to them about something, this, that, or the other, or I'm not in the office or I'm on something else. But they can get the Chevis, they can get the answer. So keeping them informed. And the sheriff is a big proponent of this. Sometimes the answer is just that we don't know. Yep, we're looking into your stolen tractor. We just don't know what happened to it. It disappeared off the face of the earth. So, but I do think we have a common belief system as far as keeping the victim informed, tracking the process, and doing what's right for the community. And it is really nice to have them there. Chevis or Marty, I have a stack this thick of her cards. I gave out 3 of them yesterday, 1 today, and then that. So then I'm done. It's like, hey, here's what you need to do. She'll help you. She gets probably quite a few texts and calls late in the night. I know she's worked weekends and no overtime for you though, right?
Nope, no overtime. I could bank it as vacation hours though.
So that's the perspective from law enforcement. It's not as caring and as thoughtful as you want to be. That's not our role. Our role is to gather that evidence, go back, take the person to jail, type up the reports, then continue on to the next call where Chevis can focus on that. And our next call may not involve the victim advocate. It may be, an accident, or it may be cows out on the highway, or it may be a disturbance and, nobody's really going to have to go to jail, just have things quieted down. But she can keep track of all that for us, and that's really important because people sometimes have a hesitancy to talk to law enforcement. Once you get to know one of us, then you'll say, hey, what's this mean? And that's a personal connection, but this time it's extended through the victim advocate's office. Does anybody have any questions before I continue?
With so many of your cases involved in domestic and family violence and protection orders and like that, tell me what works pretty good and then what doesn't work so good that could be improved in this whole situation.
Well, that's a good question. Well, domestic violence is about power and control. And so you need to have that element in order to establish if it's domestic violence or not. And I think we tend to, it's a taboo topic and nobody really wants to talk about domestic violence. It's often done behind closed doors. So I think if you can educate yourself on what domestic violence looks like, the red flags, and what you can do to help somebody who's experiencing domestic violence, letting them know that, you know, it's okay if you stay, but let's safety plan. And keeping that door open of communication, because when it takes a victim of domestic violence 7 to 9 times before they actually leave and stay gone. And then so if we're shutting the door and saying, well, you're stupid for staying, I don't know why you keep doing this, then they're gonna stay forever because they feel like nobody's there to support them. So I think that's the biggest thing, is that you can educate yourself on what domestic violence is, what the red flags are, and how to help somebody in safety plan. I think the outcomes would be a lot more successful.
I guess one other thing, Chevis is actually also an expert, or has very much or in-depth experience in dealing with human trafficking. And one of the important things to remember, human trafficking is where somebody's basically sold as a slave, either for sex acts or for labor. Law enforcement comes across them, they make a case and they make the arrest. Okay, we know what to do if they have a bunch of cocaine or illegal guns or stolen items. We take the person to jail, put those items into evidence. But if it's a human trafficking victim or even a domestic violence victim, that's evidence too. What do we do with it? Contact them, and there's also other advocates throughout the state that will work on that. But Chevis is on the Human Trafficking Task Force for Southeast Nebraska.
I think accountability is a huge one. Making sure that we're holding people who are causing harm accountable for their actions and not holding the victims accountable for why are you staying. It should be, why are you causing this harm? Any other questions?
Another question. So, just curious the length of time that you provide assistance to the victim. So, like if someone's prosecuted, and I guess how much beyond that do the victims can come back to you for assistance? So, we guess they would develop a relationship maybe with you and what it's usually for a long time.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that maybe?
So we will always work with victims of crime even after the case is closed, and we make that very apparent and clear, because the healing comes after they seek closure, and sometimes that can be a while. So I've been here for just over a year now. April 12th was my 1-year anniversary with the agency. And the very first victim that I worked with, I am still working with today, even though her case has been resolved. She'll come back or check in, just to know that she has a safety net, something that she can come back to, resources when she needs it, those types of things. So it's ongoing as long as the victim is seeking it.
So I guess domestic violence isn't going to go away, so your people contacting you is going to be a large amount, and then to still fulfill all your job duties. What does the look like in the future to support you? Do you ever do support groups, or how do you do that to keep you able to do everything else you do?
So support groups for victims of domestic violence.
Do you guys host any of those?
We do not, but it's something that is that we can do. From past experience from doing support groups out in the Quad Cities, it's very hard to get victims to want to trust outsiders and to get that going. We've started a small support group of moms who've actually lost children due to victimization, and they've kind of branched off and done that for themselves. But domestic violence support groups are actually very hard to implement and start. And I believe Hope Crisis has one, or has them so often, or something that they've also tried to work on as well. But support would be, we're always taking volunteers, so if anybody ever wants to volunteer their time, we have so much documentation. I feel like I do more documentation than actually direct service work with victims, which is the downside to having a federally run grant.
Yes, sir.
These family incidents are one of the most dangerous places that officers get to go.
They are,
Describe how you approach those to try to protect yourselves from those kinds of situations.
so, from a law enforcement perspective, if you're going to domestic violence call, you have two people who have been intimately involved with each other. Whatever you think it's right or wrong, they love each other. They, had children together maybe. You're going in and you're trying to separate them and still maintain safety. Fortunately, a lot of people do respect that law enforcement's there. And I'm going to say he because the vast majority of abusers are males. Agree?
Yep.
So the vast majority are males, but that doesn't mean that's your main threat. So we do things like, I'm probably not going to get much closer than this to talk to the person. It's going to take her a little bit of time. I can back up and get away. We have tasers, things like that. But a lot of times you have to have officer presence, meaning hey, I'm in charge here. Things are going to be settled down, and then talking in a calm manner. Everybody here, you're respectable. You're leaders in the community. When you're at your business, you're in charge. That's kind of the way it would be for law enforcement. The deputies also have to recognize that, hey, this is a situation. It may take a third one. Chevis has been there. We've got the victim. We have the suspect. Then you have kids. And the cops they may have their own kids, but they're not good at dealing with them in that situation a lot of times. So that's what we do. It's a lot of protocols of a little distance. Don't have them sit down. You want to have them sit down so they're less likely to charge up at you. Let them know who's in control. It doesn't mean you have to be mean about it. It's just like you're directing who they're talking to. Don't let them get back involved in the fight again, because they can hear what the other one's saying or whatever. They'll start arguing again and the tempers rise. So try and keep them separated. Separate room, inside, outside, if possible. Talking in lower voices, and then not having them face each other. So the people will have their backs to each other in separate rooms, so they're not looking at the other person. Those are just standard things that we would do. Anything else? Chevis knows all the answers.
If I don't, we'll ask Roger.
But I think the one thing that I like is that the victim advocates can get out there, help keep the community safe, help keep those individuals safe. But as leaders, I think that's why she would want to come here and talk to you, so you're aware of it, so you know that it's a good program. If you hear people talking about it or wanting to know anything about it, you can say, okay, here, we do need this in our community. It's not something that just you sit in the office and you're playing on computer games all day. She's out there in the field. People come to her office all the time. Come to the sheriff's office and we'll take them to be interviewed, because they'll say things with Chevis there that they won't tell me by myself. And I'm a pretty nice guy, I think. So that's important to have her as a resource for us too.
Victims often just want to know that somebody's in their corner, and that's basically what my role is to make sure that they don't feel like they're alone. Yes.
Is this for Gage County only?
That is Gage County only, yes.
Are there some communities in Gage County that numbers are higher, like?
We don't actually break it down. I don't know if, being the county, if you have any insight on that?
It's pretty much a good spread throughout all the communities. Obviously, a small town of 100 is going to have a lot less than Beatrice. But it also means that in those smaller towns, it may not get reported as much. So that's where we have that unreported number that we have to deal with. So when they actually do make a report, it's the first report, but it's the 10th, 12th, 50th time it's happened. Because we talk about behind closed doors, what happens there. All the rest of the time when they're not out in public, back in the house, whether it's physical control or assault or just domination, a look or a threatening to harm the female's pet or the family pet. If you leave me or you don't do that, I'm going to kill, Scooter the dog or whatever. And that's something that we have to look for.
if you ever want a training on domestic violence 101, I'm happy to do that. I think there's a lot of complexities to domestic violence as to why our survivors just don't leave or victims don't leave, that people don't think about, and that's, I mean, Hanson just talked about one of them right there. It sounds silly to the person who's never been through domestic violence, but anybody who loves their pets can kind of understand, children have children, why they don't just leave. Yes, Roger?
One thing to mention, a lot of these, particularly domestic violence cases, can use this as in getting people to alternative resolutions.
Yep.
And, I don't give a dang what anybody says. A lot of times the victim's gonna be the officer to the detention center to pawn them out.
Yep.
You're like, what the heck is going on? And that's what we need to face. And so, a lot of times if they're eligible, get them in the type of diversion program where they get assistance, get counseling for the family, get HHS and Health and Human Services involved for care for the children. All these things come together, and Chevis is an integral part of that. Because there's stuff a lot of times I don't know about it until like the next day or further down the road. So those are critical.
Yeah, and Roger makes a very good point that oftentimes victims, especially victims that go back to domestic violence or to the person that's causing them harm, they don't want to leave the person that's causing the harm. They just want the violence to stop. And so if we can get in the middle of that and provide them with resources to wrap around the whole family, then that's just as good as well if we can get the abuse to stop.
So do you ever track like getting your preventative or reoccurring? So with your programs taking place, don't you foresee people come your route, providing those resources? Do they come back to you in 5 years saying, I'm in a new relationship and it's happened to me again? Or do you feel like they have those resources with your program that kind of helps break that cycle?
So we have a spreadsheet where we keep track of all the cases that were a lot of victims of domestic violence who find themselves with the same person causing harm repeatedly with multiple cases, but then we've also seen it where they've moved on. But it's not so much that the person, the victim, has sought out like their picker is bad. It's that with domestic violence, people that cause harm, they're very good at isolating and seeking out those that are most vulnerable and weak. And so then that's how they find themselves back in those abusive relationships again. So yeah, we do see that. We don't track it per se, but you can see a pattern on our spreadsheet for sure.
And then we have to think about the children. I know Roger's very adept and very involved with the juvenile process, but we want to change the trajectory of these children's lives. We don't want them growing up, we don't want girls growing up thinking it's normal for a guy to hit me. Our kid to say, oh, that's what you do with women, if they backtalk you. So we want to change that trajectory on a whole range of topics: drugs, theft, family living, domestic violence.
And we'll do like domestic violence 101 trainings or topics with victims. So it's not just that they're coming in and getting immediate service needs, but they're also getting education so they don't find themselves back in those same situations. Other questions? Well, thank you very much for having us.
Yes, thank you.